Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War news update for the 14th of July, 2023. Let's get straight to where we normally start. The Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. Okay, 550 liquidated personnel is pretty much where we've seen it there or thereabouts for the last few weeks. 5 tanks, 9 APVs, again, fairly average numbers for those losses. And then we go up to what actually now is pretty average numbers, but just significant losses in terms of Russian artillery systems, tubed artillery, multiple launch rocket systems. So 24 artillery pieces, 2 MLRS lost yesterday, and that just compounds the problem. There have been some reports actually over the last few days that Russian artillery is decreasing. The rate of fire, the amount of hassle the Ukrainian forces are getting from artillery is decreasing. That's been mentioned, I think, by Hannah Malia, the Deputy Defence Minister. I'm pretty sure she said that yesterday. That is significant. If they are now saying that, then we are starting to see the effect, the true effect of this campaign against the Russian artillery. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, 31 drones. That was not from last night, but the night before, but there was another drone attack last night. 2 cruise missiles, 24 vehicles and fuel tanks is a high number there. The Ukrainians are still hammering the Russian logistics. So you put all of this together, you put the hits on the artillery systems themselves, the hits on these depots, ammunition dumps in certain places, and then the vehicles that get the ammunition to the artillery pieces, and you can see that surely there will be an effect on the rate of fire. That's all 3 elements of being able to fire artillery being hit consistently. 10 pieces of special equipment, I think that is the highest I've seen. I think I've seen it at 10 before, certainly 9. That is a large number. As you can see, the average is only just over 1 per day. So they're hitting 10 yesterday. That's a significant outcome for the Ukrainians in terms of special equipment. That'll be electronic warfare. We've seen a number of pieces of electronic warfare hits. In fact, I've got some video footage of one. We've seen a lot of ISR being hit, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, so video cameras and whatnot, positions placed up in high places on masts and pylons and so on and so forth. So that is, I would say, a really useful day for the Ukrainians again, and not unusual. They are just absolutely hammering logistics and artillery and special equipment every single day. Right, just to put some meat on the bones there, Mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov, reports that during a recent attack on Kovalsko's stamping plant in Tokmak, 200 Russian soldiers, including their commander, were killed. That's a massive number if true. He also claims the FSB-related officers are pulling out their relatives from the city. Wow. Again, that could be psyops, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Tokmak has been hammered repeatedly, and you can bet your bottom dollar that if they are hitting things like small ammunition dumps behind enemy lines here and there, then they also know where 200 troops are being billeted. Absolutely, for sure. And the Russians know this is an issue because they are billeting their soldiers in different ways. So we've seen around Henichesk, when that was hit, they started putting them in, say, a holiday village where they're all in lots of different little houses or huts or whatever, trying to spread them out, but then they were hit themselves. But the Russians know that this is an issue, and if you're going to have an army on a front line, you are going to need to billet your soldiers vaguely all in one place. Otherwise, it's just a nightmare. You've got, okay, here we've got the town of Tokmak. Everyone has to go and stay in a different house. It's just an absolute nightmare for organization, for doing army stuff. You can't organize yourself in that way. So therefore, you are going to put soldiers together. And as soon as you put soldiers together, Ukrainians appear to know where that is, or in many cases, and they get hit. And this kind of thing is not unusual, but it's a massive drain on the Russian resources, their personnel. As you can see, huge numbers of personnel lost, as according to the general staff. And again, what's the accuracy of these? Well, we try and piece it together. It's at least somewhat accurate. And then the loss of these commanders. Now, talking about the loss of commanders, 500 dead Russian armed forces officers in 100 days is what it looks like when you lose an entire generation of junior and field grade ground officers and start throwing their rear echelon officer in named technical specialists into the meat grinder. You're starting to see reports like ISW today saying that the Russian defense is brittle. And that's with reference to people like Popov being lost as well. So he is the guy that was kind of demoted for saying that stuff in public, and then now has disappeared. Um, Although this is quite an interesting bit of maths. 2,500 Russian officers killed in Ukraine. That line has been crossed. The last 500 names were added in about 100 days, as if that's amazing. Well, actually, 100 days is a fifth of the war, and 500 names is a fifth of that total. So it's completely what you'd expect. But nevertheless, that is significant, right? Maths. Uh, we have got figures from, yeah, I haven't missed anything. We got figures from the Russians, though. They claim 311 tanks have been destroyed in the last month. And that is, of course, insane. Just nuts. And it's why I don't report Russian figures, because they're just completely fanciful. Right. Ukrainian army has destroyed a Russian Borisovlebsk multifunctional electronic warfare system in Zaporizhia with what this source asks is it if it's Jesus wept. Man, I haven't done that in ages. Oh, just went to press, went to move. Oh man, I've blown my ears out. Sorry, everyone who was listening to this loudly on their TVs. Okay, right. Well, that's woken me up anyway. So here we have the claim that it is and yes, I know I can pause my tabs. Just give me the small joys in life of getting angry with my computer, or with me, really. So that is, I don't think it's a JDAM. It looks more like well, I mean, it could be. Uh, I mean, the idea is that these are both the same bits of footage, but they're not. This is two bits of footage spliced together, and that's definitely a HIMARS. You can see the uh, tungsten sort of ball bearings or whatever they are, just shredding the area around. So that is one of the HIMARS type of HIMARS missile rockets, yeah, missiles. But I think that's a completely different bit of footage, and that could be JDAM, but it looks to me like it's probably going to be a HIMARS hitting a significant piece of kit. Anyway, apparently that is a single bit of footage about a piece of electronic warfare. So I don't think it is, but it's something getting hit. Now, this is right. Let's get this right, shall we? Let's make it big and then have to mute it again. Let's, yeah, yeah, no, I will mute it. Right, okay. Here we have a drone being attacked by a Tor surface to air missile system. And that Tor system, oof, just mere centimeters away from taking out that drone. Now, this is the classic high value defensive munition taking out a low value target. We talked about this at the beginning of the war. Goodness me, it seems so long ago when we were talking about Stingers taking out all land 10s. And you're thinking Stingers are 10,000. I don't know how much they cost per missile, but it was hugely more than the All-Land 10. It's like $100,000 for a missile, and the All-Land 10's like, I don't know, $10,000 a kit or whatever it was. But the idea is what's the damage that All-Land 10 can do? It's spotting for artillery that can take out 2 bits of kit. Okay, so that could take out that All-Land 10 could be responsible for the destruction of like $5 million worth of kit. So you spend quite a bit of money on a missile taking that out. It's what the potential that bit of kit can do. So this is a cheap drone being taken out with a more expensive munition. So that's absolutely fine. That's understandable. However, it misses here. Thomas Tyner was saying that the proximity fuse will detect the size of something that is probably more significant than this drone. This drone is too small to set off the proximity fuse, so the munition just flies past it. But anyway, I just thought that was of interest. So we'll see that again. And it is close. And poof. So there you go. Close shave. And I imagine, for the drone operator, and I'm going to show you some footage of the drone operator, like hooked in, it's like something from Matrix or something. But hooked into like the 3D headset, the VR headset, going like that. I'd imagine if you're operating that drone, you'd be like, whoa, reacting really physiologically to that. Anyway, shut up, piss. So, sabotage, more sabotage on the Russian railways. Another relay box was torched in Slavianka Urbakovo section of the track near St. Petersburg. Saboteurs tried to set fire to a second cabinet nearby, but apparently it did not ignite. And then, meanwhile, there are two reports have already been that two sorry reports that two people have been arrested after another railway arson in Russia. These men were detained after the incident yesterday in Kirov region. Um, so there you go. There are saboteurs, and these may be genuine saboteurs that have been captured, or it could just be a bit of PR for the Russians. But it's a risky thing to do that. Hats off to the people who are doing that within Russia, because that is not a low risk pastime. Right, air defense numbers. So going on to strikes now. 16 out of 17 drones were shot down from last night. So there was a large number of drones, kamikaze drones, as well as 7 reconnaissance drones eliminated yesterday, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. So that they are using these Iranian Shahed drones consistently every single night. This amount, like 15, 20, 30 drones. It's just a lot every night, consistently being thrown at Ukraine, and some of them do get through. And they cause damage, of course, first, but also the ones that don't get through still cause a lot of damage. So Tim White was reporting last night. Final tweet of yesterday informed you that successes for the air defense in the southern regions of Ukraine, but explosions in Kryvyi Rih. Unfortunately, these did prove to be blasts caused by kamikaze drones, and at least one man was injured. So there were issues. 6 drones were shot down in Dnipropetrovsk, but in Kryvyi Rih, 3 sites were hit. Various buildings at a utility company were damaged. The transport company was also affected, as were 2 private houses. Meanwhile, artillery damaged buildings in Velikno-Makyliv village in the area. So, of course, Russian artillery is always pumping out, although the question is, are they doing it to the same degree that they have been in the past? But maybe... So they say 16 out of 17 were taken out. Tim White suggesting that maybe more actually hit, unless some of those hits were from damaged drones falling from the sky. Right, then there were explosions yesterday in Donetsk City, the former Topaz factory. That seems to be a significant target for the Ukrainians there. Explosions rang out in occupied Mariupol, where there's an arrival at the Kadyrov barracks. According to preliminary information, the wounded Kadyrov residents were secretly taken to Donetsk, which may indicate their serious condition. Judging by the information noise in the Russian media environment, the damage can be comparable to the Yurivskaya cotton, which the Russians also massively disguised as air defense work. In other words, there could be a lot of troop losses in this Mariupol hit. And then this is Sokov, who was the highest ranked commander who died after being in this building, and this building was taken out. So just to let you know what the building did look like and what it looks like now. That's what it looks like now. And that's what it should look like. So quite a nice place, and that's probably why you had Sokov staying there, and now it's not so nice. He died. In fact, his funeral was yesterday, and like a military funeral. The supposition is that he wouldn't have been the only high-ranking individual in there. He was the highest ranking. He was the second in command of Southern Military District, in charge of 85,000 men. So this was a huge loss, and there would have been other officers there for sure. And meanwhile, explosions in Voronezh in Russia. Ukraine sent drones. The claim is that they were taken out by air defense, but it's very low, 100 meters height. So apparently there was no damage to property or people. That's the claims from the Russians. But you can see it's really super low. And then, as well as that, there were drone attacks on Kursk too in Russia. But that seems like they were taken down. The remnants were found in the reservoir and on the streets of the drones, which is to say the Ukrainians are still consistently sending drones into Russia to keep the Russians on their toes and fix their air defense systems in place, is one of the reasons I think they do that. Right. Now, talking about Popov, this isn't Sokov, this is Popov, the guy who is alive and well, a very senior chap, Major General Popov, down in the Zaporizhia area, came out with an audio message saying that he had made complaints about the troops not being rotated, there being no counter battery fire, so on and so forth, saying just things are not looking good. And then he was making those complaints to Gerasimov, who's doing nothing about it. So he then threatened to go to Putin to talk about this, and then Gerasimov basically sacked him or moved him off sideways or whatever. He was demoted, and now, well, we'll come on to this. So after Major General Popov was sacked or resigned, a couple of mill bloggers dropped the letters Z or V from the name of their channel. So this is being met really critically by ultra-nationalist mill bloggers. This is great to see discord amongst the Russians, right? Also, some started to criticize more openly the Russian Ministry of Defense with a rare level of candid speech. Some openly stated that Popov was the only capable general in the Russian army, and actually a lot of people have said this. And accused Shoigu and Gerasimov of sacking him because of that. Others have linked Popov to a feud between him and the MOD regarding the handling of the fallen Storm Shadow missile, which was recovered intact a few days ago. Shoigu wanted the missile to be put on display, while Popov wanted to send it to Russian engineers for study. However, the most striking comments come from military bloggers who openly write that Ukrainian counteroffensive in the south is working. This is interesting. They openly criticize a fixation on how many Bradleys or Leopards have been destroyed, a fixation that some journalists or commentators in the West have too. I've tried not to fixate on that because it's an offensive. They're going to lose a bunch of vehicles, and kind of like meh. Like, it's bad. Obviously, you don't want to lose vehicles, but you can't imagine the Ukrainians are going to waltz into the Russian lines and just do their thing and put their feet up after a day. It's going to be tough. Anyway, the Western Russian experts had a very static analysis of Russian strength. They counted the numbers of tanks and cannons Russia had. Actually, I made a similar critique a few months ago. What matters is not a list of equipment; it's a dynamic, and the dynamic is undoubtedly favourable to Ukraine, says P-Star 11. Chris Owicki talks about Major General Popov here. General Ivan Popov is reported to have disappeared following the publication of his highly critical remarks about the conduct of the war in southern Ukraine. He said earlier that he had been dismissed after criticizing the Russian senior military leadership. According to Popov's wife, communication with her husband has abruptly terminated after he was summoned by the leadership and flew somewhere to solve his problems. She says that the now famous message published yesterday was not intended for a wide circle. It is said to have been released by Popov's associates to drum up support for returning him to his post. Interesting, and this is great for the Ukrainians. You want all of this and more. You want discord amongst the Russian ranks, and this is why the ISW today, as I said, is calling Russia's defense brittle. It's not in a good way. Now, Surovikin is still missing. He's still apparently being held and interrogated in Moscow, according to the Wall Street Journal. He was not accused of complicity, but probably knew about the plans of the leader of the Wagner PMC, Prigozhin, to rebel. Surovikin could be released when Putin decides how to deal with the aftermath of the rebellion. It's still just a big hot mess, right? And Ukraine themselves, just some other bits and pieces here, has created 30 minefields, 5 kilometers of trenches, and 6.5 kilometers of anti-tank ditches on the northern borders. So this isn't like 5 kilometers, I presume, of width, but 5 kilometers of depth, 6.5 kilometers of anti-tank ditches. So, that is quite considerable on 30 minefields. Commander of the Ukrainian forces. United Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Lieutenant General Serhiy Nayev says. So the Ukrainians are possibly looking at the Russian successes in terms of defending and have sorted themselves out on the northern borders. Right, ISW here, Popov's dismissal over the Russian casualties and reported complaints about the lack of force rotations further support ISW's assessment that Russian defenses in Ukraine are likely brittle. The apparent theatre-wide lack of force rotation suggests that Russian forces would have to rely on existing and already degraded forces in the event of any Ukrainian breakthrough. Popov's complaints about Russian forces' poor counter-battery capabilities and significant Russian casualties from Ukrainian artillery fire are likely a result of what the ISW assesses to be the Ukrainian effort to attrit Russian forces defending in southern Ukraine. So you put these bits of the jigsaw together and you do get a picture that the Ukrainians are successfully attriting the Russians to a significant degree. And if you've got General Popov saying this, and then disappearing on the back of saying this, then you know there's going to be an element of truth. So you can be the greatest Russian shill or pro Kremlin voice in my threads, but do you know what? Your own guys are saying this, so and they know damn sight more than you. Popov knows. So Russia's lack of reserves likely made it impossible for Gerasimov to seriously consider Popov's appeal, and Popov's dismissal has further illustrated that Russian forces are unable to conduct force rotations. Disruptions to the Russian command overseeing Russian defensive operations in southern Ukraine will likely have some immediate but marginal impacts on Russian forces. And talking about what is going on the front line, it's more of the same, really. Ukrainian forces conduct counteroffensive operations on at least 3 sectors of the front line and made some gains in some areas. We'll look into that in my frontline update as we continue. Just a quick analysis here. No report says Russia is pressuring in Kharkiv and Luhansk oblasts. An overview of daily events in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Russia has momentum near Kupiansk, Svatva, and Crimea, and appears to be launching attacks around Hyliopolye as well. That's down in the south there. So it's bizarre. But I haven't seen much more detail from no reports or anyone else of this, but I will be looking into that before my frontline video. Russian source Romanov claims that the village of Novosibirsk, so this is up near Svatova in that northern sector, he claims that the Russians have got control of that village. So there's been quite fierce fighting over that for the last 3 or 4 days. It has swapped hands a number of times, Novosibirsk, over the course of the war, but it does show that the Russians are putting pressure in the north, where they do have a fairly decent force concentration, and I think half decent force quality compared to where other places along the front line. Right, to the front, the Bakhmut axis, says no reports here. Today I received confirmation about the areas that were contested earlier, but can be reported are under Ukrainian control right now. Ukraine controls the entrances to Klishchivka and big parts of the trench network, which is interesting. They don't control the whole trench network, then, is the implication there. Russians' counterattack failed, so there's gains for the Ukrainians along here. Andrew Perpetua has some gains. The Russians are pushed back into Klishchivka by the looks of it. And you see a bit of footage like this. I don't know if this has literally come out today. I haven't seen this footage before, and it's literally just come out. And this is showing Klishchivka, right? From, one would assume, the heights behind it. You can see the physical geography there, but you can also see a massive amount of smoke. Now, that I think is generated smoke. That is not smoke from being bombarded, but that means that something is happening. So either that is smoke from the Ukrainians as they are attacking, or possibly more likely smoke from the Russians hinting at a retreat. And indeed, to cover a retreat, C4H10F02P, the source says. We haven't seen the Russians use much smoke before, though, but I don't know. I think that looks more likely to be smoke from a retreat, but it's certainly significant either way. Russian channels are reporting big fights in the Vermisky Ledge. So this is Velika Novosilka area, which is the area south of Velika Novosilka. The enemy went on a large-scale offensive. So that's the Ukrainians went on a large-scale offensive, that's according to the Russians, in the area of Uruzhaine. Prior to the attack, they conducted a massive artillery preparation. There's a big fight going on. So expect today, I guess, some news to be coming out of both Bakhmut and the south. And there's activity along the, this is along the Konka River, which is a river, just this map should, so that's the Dnipro there. We've got the Antonivsky Bridge coming down here, and activity taking place up there. The Russians sort of under a bit of pressure in the dachas either side of the road there. And you've got the Ukrainians gaining some purchase across the Konka River. So this is the Konka River here. And there's a bridge there over the Konka that the Ukrainians have tried to attack with sea drones and aerial drones, marine drones and aerial drones. And the Ukrainians are also, taking some land here to the south of the Konka. Well, they are also, by the looks of it, here, FPV drones are attacking Russian boats under the Konka River Bridge. An overturned Russian truck is also visible. So there's quite a bit of activity. quite a lot of activity around the Concord Bridge. So this is the Concord Bridge there, uh, and as it goes over in that direction, it then goes towards the Antonivsky Bridge, and you are seeing drones then hit. That's the overturned truck, and hit things under the. There you go, trying to hit things under the bridge that are protecting themselves. So that's anyway. It's just to say there's a footage of stuff going on around there in Kherson as well. There's some great footage of riverine boats, Ukrainian riverine boats in action on the Dnipro River that I'll show you bits of. Two in the frontline update. Right, now moving on to military aid. Ukraine has already received cluster munitions from the US. This is a classic. Yeah, we're going to give them cluster munitions. Turns out they're already on a plane. You know, they announce this sometimes after they've got to Ukraine, other times it's on the way. Do you know what I mean? It's not like we've decided, right, now let's go and put this into action. It's already in action, and the announcement comes after. So we just got them. We haven't used them yet, but they can radically change the battlefield, says one of the Ukrainian commanders there. There was claims from the Russians that Ukrainians were using cluster munitions against Tokmak, and that the idea was that they announced that they were getting cluster munitions, and that gave them permission to kind of use them more openly. And so the claim is that they were cluster munitions used, probably Turkish ones that they had been given previously. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Significant news about out of Bulgaria today from one of their MPs. Bulgaria been quietly selling arms to Ukraine since the start of the war. In fact, at one stage, as I reported, they provided a third of all Ukrainian ammunition, supposedly. So now the long-expected decision on direct and public transfers has arrived. They plan on sending 100 APCs, probably BTR-60. So these are pretty old 1960s APCs, but they'll be useful for sure. You might not be using them right on the front line, but you'll be using to transport troops around, kind of a glorified taxi service. Super useful. Thank you, Bulgaria. What I understand is that Bulgaria getting backfilled from possibly US stuff. So again, it goes back to like this whole war. You know, I had a big talk about this war being in the national interests of the US. I was kind of misinterpreted by a few commenters, which I will try and clarify in my extra today, because I think people misinterpreted how I saw the US. It was not at all critical. It's just this is how the world is and how it goes. And it's not to say there aren't moral aspects at all to what the US or any other nation does. But anyway, I'll go into more detail about that later. So Ukraine will receive more than 1.5 billion euros of military aid from the international partners. Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov said long-range scout missiles, that's from France, Leopard tanks, additional Patriots, F-16 pilot training, and just some of the things that can be announced publicly. And this is super important. In other words, for all the things that are announced publicly, there's a bunch of stuff that isn't announced publicly that Ukraine will be getting. And that is very significant. Belgium is considering sending military instructors to Ukraine. I don't know if that's a poor translation or poor reporting. I'm not sure they're going to be sending them to Ukraine. They might be sending them to Poland to train Ukrainians. So the EU plans to do more to strengthen Ukraine's air defense, including missiles and fighter jets. I don't know in what capacity the Belgians will be used. Fact sheet on the German military aid. So this has moved from pledged to delivered. So quite often you hear these things pledged and you think that's brilliant, but they don't get them for like 6 to 8 months or whatever. So it's really useful to know when they actually get them. So now we know that the Germans have given, and they've got to Ukraine, 6 Gepards, self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, 5 border protection vehicles, 1 HX-81 tank transporter, a lot of rounds of ammunition, and some drone spare parts as well as other stuff. So also a bridge layer, artillery rounds, smoke rounds, laser designators for the Iris. That's the short range air defense system, and 10 fire command units. Wow. Okay, so moving on, Voice of America says that Cambodian experts are training Ukrainians in demining techniques. Obviously, Cambodia has been a uh, a place of a lot of demining over the last few decades since the Vietnam War. Cambodian demining experts met with members of Ukraine's state emergency service at a facility in Poland last week to teach demining techniques, according to a video from Voice of America. Now, we know that actually they've been doing that previously. This isn't the first time, I believe, but really good that Cambodia are assisting. Now, going on to Russian military aid. Now, I have to be careful because quite often I just show really cruddy stuff that the Russians are given. And it's not me trying to be biased. I'm trying to like get an idea. It's just that there isn't often much that comes out about what Russia gets. And then you hear stuff like this and you're thinking, God. State of the Russian army, the Russian Ministry of Defense has sent a weapons batch to mobilized soldiers in the Luhansk region. So the Russian MOD is literally sending this. The Russians are videoing it and are putting this out themselves. Weapons such as PPS submachine guns, PPSH-41, SKS Carabin, and other pre-World War II weaponry can be seen. So these guys, these Russians, are being sent pre-World War II small arms stuff, and that is just a simple fact. I mean, it's there. And look at that gun. That is not new. These come right out the ark. Not that they had guns in the ark, or even that the ark existed. That's a debate for another day. So you can see, yeah, all of this really old kit, and you're thinking that, yeah, for all as I say every day, for every bit of news I give you about Ukraine and what they are getting, and each country is giving Ukraine so that they are becoming upgraded. You're wondering whether the Russians are getting upgraded. He's fixing a freaking bayonet there. Uh, are the Russians getting upgraded, or are they being degraded consistently and having to dip into stockpiles that are cobwebbed and defunct effectively? Well, to add to that, there's now the Ukrainians have captured a trench which had a box of ammunition, 7.62 ammunition, that was half century old. So it's a 50-year-old box of ammunition from Chinese ammunition, basically. Now, is that something they've been given recently, just the Chinese getting rid of their old ammunition, or is it something that they had bought like 50 years ago and have had in stock since then? It's just absolutely incredible. Was that 1967 there? Just incredible. So there you go. Uh, at the same time, UAC reports that it handed over a batch of new build Su-35S multi-role to the Russian MOD. This is a second batch of Su-35Ss delivered in 2023. The number of aircraft is not specified. However, the video appears to show just two. So the delivery of the first batch of the new build Su-35S multi-role fighters in 2023 took place in late June. It too appears to have comprised just two aircraft. Thus, a total of four Su-35Ss have seemingly been handed over to the Russian MOD this year so far. So on the one hand, okay, they're still building Su-35s. That's one of their most modern fighters. But on the other hand, only four in a year. That is probably not enough. So yeah, make of that what you will. Right, moving on to geopolitical stuff. So conflict is brewing between Iran and Russia. Always good. It's just like we've seen with arguments within the ultra-nationalist mill blogger community, arguments between the Russian MOD and their officers, arguments between Wagner and the Russian MOD. Love it. Sit back, get your popcorn. A conflict is brewing between Iran and Russia after the Russian Federation supported the UAE in a territorial dispute with Tehran. This is where Russia have had to position themselves to support Middle Eastern nations because they know they rely on OPEC and all these other nations and organizations to kind of side with them maybe a little bit in certain decisions and whatnot concerning hydrocarbons, the rest of the world, geopolitics, strategies. and the US, so on and so forth. 3 islands, Abu Musa, Greater Tumb, and Lesser Tumb, have been controlled by Iran since 1971, but they are also claimed by the UAE. The Emirates recently renewed their claim to the territories, and this week, Russia and the Gulf Arab states issued a joint statement calling for a diplomatic solution to the territorial dispute. Fantastic. So basically, Russia are calling for appeasement here, in the same way that other nations call for appeasement to Russia, and now, you know, it's coming to bite. In this case, it's biting Iran on the butt, and then thinking, no, that's not good enough. These are our islands. It's just there's all sorts of poignancy to these kind of maneuvers. Instead, Iran declared that these islands, quote, belong to it forever, and such statements contradict the friendly relations between Tehran and its neighbors. 2 days after the announcement of the statement, Tehran summoned the Russian ambassador, and Iranian officials called on the Russian Federation to correct its position on the territorial conflict. Absolutely fascinating. This then came from Sergei Markov. It looks like Russians are becoming aware of the potential repercussions of their conflict with Iran. A conflict between Russia and Iran is brewing. Iran was outraged by Russia's decision to sign with the Arab countries from the Cooperation Council of the Arab States of the Persian Gulf a resolution on a peaceful solution of the territorial dispute over the islands of Greater Tumb and Lesser Tumb and the Strait of Hormuz, proposed by the UAE. This caused outrage in Iran. In Iran, these islands are considered their own, and they do not want to have any disputes over them. The Russian ambassador, as I've already mentioned, has been summoned. Relations with Iran are now important for Russia. We don't produce our own drones. The East is a delicate matter. Sorry, I was just kind of summarizing what this Russian has said. Yeah, the press in Iran is indignant and is calling for a review of relations with Russia. That is brilliant from our point of view, our being not pro-Kremlin. Sometimes I wonder whether Russia is being serious here. That's horrible. Of course, they're being serious with all the torture and death and horrific stuff. But there's part of me that thinks, are you so far in that you're now becoming a cartoon villain? I mean, is that what's really going on here? Like, are you just taking the piss now? So this is today at the OSCE, which is the Security Council of Europe. Russia, when speaking about gender equality, referred to women as the weak gender, right? Whatever you think about gender equality, you don't go to a platform like that and go, well, you know, the weak gender, in all seriousness, you know, the weak gender, women. Bleh. You don't say that as a nation in front, like, where probably somewhere around 50% of the people there are women. Like 30 to 50% of the politicians. I know there's not gender equality in politics yet in Europe, that's for sure. But you don't go to a platform like that and say something like that. Russia should be on the charm offensive here, right? It should be going to places like this and really trying to win friends. So and influence people. I just think they must just think, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. It's sunk cost. We're done for. Oh well, let's just sod it. Women are rubbish. I hate ginger people. You know, whatever. Just going nuts over anything. Disabled. Boo. It's just, what are you doing, Russia? What are you doing? Anyway, there were loads of responses to this by loads of nations, as is listed here, and just they got an absolute spanking. But just, yeah, I don't know. Oh goodness! And Orban, Viktor Orban, good old Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, stated earlier today during a radio interview, and he said this before. Actually, I've reported him saying similar things like this before. Ukraine has lost its sovereignty. It has no money, no military industry. It receives everything from the West. With him further saying during the interview that the war could be over whenever the United States decide it so. I'll tell you what, Orban, here's something for you to do. Take the words United States, right? Just put in Russia. See, Because Russia did the invading. Just change that for Russia. I'll do it for you. Imagine if Viktor Orban said this, with him further saying during the interview that the war could be over whenever Russia decides it so. Yeah, sort it out, Russia. Just what a grade A plonker. But it's what we come to expect. And do you know what? Russia's lost its sovereignty. It gets all its money from everyone else buying its hydrocarbons. It's beholden to them. It's beholden to China. In fact, Russian generals have been worried about China making Russia its vassal state, and then it's kind of giving away Vladivostok. It's selling hydrocarbons cheaply to them and almost exclusively to Eastern nations there. I mean, you can make an argument that Russia ain't in a great sovereign position either at the moment, and it's basically destroyed itself and made itself so weak that it is in the palm of greater powers like China. So I don't know. Orban, do one. So I talked yesterday about Marjorie Taylor Greene as the Congresswoman for the 14th Congressional District of Georgia, not a senator. Come on, get it right. She tried to pass some amendments to a bill, and with people like Matt Gaetz. And as I said, they're not representative of the Republican Party. They are the extreme. Here, no report says the US House of Representatives has rejected attempts by conservative Republicans to end aid to Ukraine. A group of far-right Republicans insisted on considering a slew of amendments that would have banned any security assistance to Ukraine. And we heard some of them yesterday, or was it the day before? I can't remember. Anyway, Democrats and a majority of Republicans voted against 5 House Republican-backed initiatives to limit or roll back US aid to Ukraine using the annual Pentagon policy bill. That failed to get through, as was expected, right? The question is, how big is this minority of representatives, people like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene? Hopefully, they are working themselves into irrelevancy because they are fringe. But that said, we see similar things in the EU as well. And the EU has an interesting political makeup that has been changing over the last decade, over the last 5 years since kind of Brexit. We've seen the far right get in more and more around. I wrote an article on Greece recently, the elections in Greece, really exemplifying this. So, as always today, it's the extreme right and the extreme left that are keen to stop anything that can help Ukraine and make Europe safer. So, there was a vote in Europe which got through fairly easily in a record time of just 2 months. This is a historic move. The EU defence cooperation and security. EU is committed to support the ramp up of the defence industrial base to deliver the ammunition Ukraine needs. So this is the act in support of ammunition production has been adopted. 582 votes, 505 for, 56 against, and that's what O'Brien is talking about being made up of the far right, far left, and 21 abstentions. So there is that element exists, of course. Well, most places in the world, right? Not, most places that have a democratic representative democracy, will have elements of that whole political spectrum within their parliaments, right? And that's the same for the US. It's the same for the EU, and yeah, the threat for Ukraine is if that grows, if those extremes grow, because it's those extremes that do not support continued assistance for Ukraine. Anyway, that's me done for today. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate you choosing to spend your time here and not anywhere else. Well, no, you can go and spend your time anywhere else, but just spend your time here as well. No, thanks, guys. Take care. Toodle pips. I will speak to you soon.